merchandise fetching millions of dollars. It is all part of one of the most remarkable lead-ups to a US election in the country's history. Joining me live is Peter Matthews, Professor of Political Science at Cypress College in LA. Peter, can you quite believe what you're watching?
It's totally astounding, Tim, what's going on. We would never predict this. We had to write a movie about this. We would never be able to do it. It's so fantastically off the wall, but it's very significant and very dangerous. As you know, what has happened was that 52% of Americans actually disapprove of President Biden's age, but more disapprove of President Trump's performance. So there's some disconcertion about both candidates, but we're talking about Trump and the charges against him now for trying to overthrow or overturn the U.S. presidential election in 2020. And he's been indicted 4 times. He's going to be standing trial starting in January, March of this coming year during a primary season. And the way it might go is more than likely he'll be convicted of something. We're not sure exactly, but again, he's innocent until proven guilty. But if he is convicted, it'll be remarkable that a sitting candidate for president could be convicted of crimes.
Yeah, fresh this morning, Donald Trump's former lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, very high profile, has pleaded not guilty to those Georgia charges that accuse him of trying to illegally overturn the results of the 2020 election in the state.
Yeah, so those Georgia charges are RICO charges. They're based on the Georgia RICO statute, which is the Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act. And that means there was a conspiracy of organized conspiracy among 19 people, including President Trump, in this charge, and Giuliani was his right-hand man, to actually find votes. And President Trump made a phone call arranged by Mark Meadows and Giuliani to go ahead and try to coerce and convince the Georgia Secretary of State to find a little over 11,000 votes. And Trump, even his own words, said, just find me one vote more than what I need. It'll be 11,000 something. I won this state, he says, and you need to find those votes. So and then coercion used, is implied coercion. And you've got a real problem here because this is completely against the law. It is, some would say that it's going against the American system of democracy and of a regularized election and changing the guard between one president and the other. And to use coercion like that and threats is extremely dangerous. It's illegal. And there's going to be, the fact that it's a RICO charge makes it even more severe. And all 19 people will be defending together. I think DA Fannie Willis wants them together in the trial. Now, there's an early trial that one of them is requested, Chesbrough. And if the early trial has for him, then the others have to go to trial as well. Unless they sever the cases, and that's very difficult to do. Let's see how this thing develops.
How do you listen, or what are you hearing from young people? You're a professor of political science. What are you hearing coming back to you from young people who are studying in this area and looking with very eager, youthful eyes at what is happening?
Very disheartening for many of them. In fact, I asked that question, what do you folks think about what's going on today in my last class meeting last week? And one of the young ladies said, we're constantly hearing about Trump and about these trials and the accusations of illegality. It's just getting overwhelming. She wants to hear other news about what's good in the world, what's happening in the United States that could be fixed. If there's any problems, how are we going to fix it based on policy? She wanted to have a real debate among the candidates, Republicans and Democrats and others, about how to solve the American problems and keep the world at peace and prosperity. But she was getting overwhelmed with all of this news about the indictments and constantly. And of course, it's a very serious thing that's going on. And we need to focus on this, and yet we shouldn't neglect other policies as well. So I'm hoping the young people will somehow overcome this and understand this is just a temporary situation, and America has to maintain its democracy, and that's the top priority, in addition to fixing other problems as well.
Because it's a massive big PR dance, isn't it, in so many ways? You and I are slightly older. We've seen lots of things in politics happen before, but Mugshot merchandise earning the equivalent of 11 to 12 million US dollars.
That's unbelievable, isn't it? And yet we can see that's what was predictable, that President Trump, the master marketer, the salesman, could actually bring in $9 million, $11 million in the few days after he was indicted, and the mugshot was taken of him. The mugshot became like a best-selling picture on all kinds of merchandise. This guy turned it into campaign funding. It's just unbelievable. And yet the people that support him, they truly believe that he was hurt and vilified, and that he was wrongfully accused of this. And they're saying, let me buy the mugs, let me buy the T-shirts, and help this man defend himself and get elected. elected. So these are very diehard supporters. They are about 62% of the Republican Party, the base, the MAGA base, MAGA, Make America Great Again. There's the mugshot. Look at that. That is pretty scary if you look at it for a lot of people. And yet again, I think Trump intended it to be something severe like that he wouldn't take any nonsense. He's going to go forward. He could even break more rules if he wants to do that in order to attain the presidency. That's his one goal, attain the presidency. And now the Heritage Foundation came out with a plan called Project 2025. It's detailed how if Trump or any other Republican wins, but especially if Trump wins, they have a plan for him to be able to reduce the power of the other branches of government and eliminate much of the federal administrative bureaucracy and allow the president to become a semi-dictator, to be able to run the country almost single-handedly. It's a very dangerous thing. People should look up Project 2025.
Yeah, and looking at the other side of things, the Democrats aren't without their problems either. Joe Biden, of course, the age, you mentioned it at the start, it's become a real issue for a lot of people in the US. He's an octogenarian, and it's not being ageist, but we've spoken about it before, you and I, this generational void in American politics.
Yes, in fact, about 70% of Americans overall feel that he is too old, and will be too old when he gets reelected, if he does, to serve effectively as president. And about even 69% of Democrats feel that he will be less effective because of his age if he serves as president a second term. So this is a real problem for him. Although the approval rating for President Biden is 52% among the overall public, it's like something like 62% disapproval rating for President Trump and 52% disapproval for President Biden. But Biden's disapproval is based primarily on his age and whether or not he'll be an effective president. Trump's disapproval is based on all these charges that he's facing and the malfeasance and unpredictability of that kind of unstable leadership that we had the last 4 years. So there's different kinds of grounds for disapproval. 62% disapproval for Trump, 52% disapproval for Biden, and Biden's is related to age, you're right.
But it's almost impossible to think, and I know that this is Donald Trump we're talking about, that if he won the candidacy for the Republican Party, that he will beat Joe Biden. Many of the experts, or nearly everyone who's sort of sitting somewhere in the middle, is saying that one of the other Republicans probably a better chance when you get to the general election. Absolutely correct. I would assess it that way as a political analyst, that President Trump will probably win the primary if things keep going as they are, because he got this diehard support, about 50% of the voters in the Republican base. But the overall electorate, Trump would be behind Biden and probably lose. And there would be another Republican, if there was another Republican, who ran without the baggage, but the similar ideas as Trump on the economy, et cetera. That Republican would be much more effective and have a better chance of beating President Biden. And some had mentioned, people like DeSantis or even Vivek Ramaswamy, but we don't know yet. Those are Republicans who try to emulate Trump on the issues, but don't have as much baggage as Trump has. So yes, you're right about that assessment. What about the nuts and bolts? What about real life? Like your students have been asking you about economy, inflation, immigration. I brought it up with an economist must have been a few weeks ago now, and asked him about the haves and have-nots in the United States. I love the country, but one thing that I watch is to me, it looks like there is a widening gap, a bigger divide between those that have and those that don't. What's your observance? My observance is you're absolutely correct. We have numbers to prove that, but it has to do on a human side. My students are wondering, why are they so much in debt, having to borrow money to go to college, not be able to recover and start their jobs when they get out of college? They have huge amounts of debt, $40,000 per student for 40 million students on the average, 40,000 each in debt. And they see that as a setback. The gap between rich and poor, in 1980, when President Reagan came into office, it was 40-1, the gap between rich and poor. The CEOs were making 40 times the income of the average worker. Today, it is 400-1, Tim, 400-1. And that grew during the administrations of both parties. So that has to be addressed because democracy requires a large middle class. And students know in practical terms what that means. They want to have the optimism they can make a living when they graduate from college and be able to raise a family, maybe buy a home or house rather, and have the American dream. That way have time for travel, have their own small business, or go on into professionals. These are dreams that young people have that actually go to the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson talked about the government guaranteeing the rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness is the fulfillment of your dreams, and young people are getting set back on those dreams. And it's very tragic. And we as Americans have an obligation to turn this around. Yeah, absolutely. And finally, just for those that are watching this program that aren't fully au fait with the way the health system works in the US, if you do not have money, if your job or the organisation you work for doesn't give you immediate health care, you're out on a limb.
It's virtually impossible to get adequate health care unless you have an employer that covers you, or if you are wealthy and can buy your own insurance, which is very few people. And there are 30 million Americans with no health care coverage, no health insurance right now. And that's why we need to have a universal, single-payer, comprehensive healthcare system, or something similar in a similar vein that Australia and Germany have, which are different systems, but they cover everyone. And that's a human right. Healthcare is a human right. And most Americans agree with that and are demanding it right now. The next president better come up with plans that he will actually implement that and not go halfway.
Peter, I know it's not Father's Day in the United States, but it is Father's Day here. So I know you're very much like me. You're a family man. I wish you a very happy Father's Day from an Australian perspective. And we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, Tim. Same to you and to all the Australian fathers and families. Thank you. Happy Father's Day.
Thank you, Peter.